So this is the piece that we're going to make, and I've added 3 different sections to the bottom. Now you don't have to add any or all of them, but I really like those all clustered up. These are the beads that we've actually got left over from what looks like quite a diminutive little package of beads. So these are available both in the UK and the US. Our UK store ships out to Europe and UK, and the US store takes care of the rest of the available locations. So I want to show you the beads first, and then we'll get cracking. I won't keep you hanging around too much longer. So in the front portion of the beautiful Never Give Up bead mix, you get all of these gorgeous, gorgeous beads. So you've got lemons and amber yellows, as well as some really cool metallics and crystals. It's a fabulous blend. Really, really gorgeous colour. Now, we've had some sunshine. I've already said this once, but nobody could hear me. It was very sad. We've had some sunshine in the UK today, which is lovely because my bones prefer a bit of heat. Now, at the back of the bead mix, behind all those beads, you get a second pochette. And in that pochette, you get a beautiful pair of gossamer style wings. So I'm just going to allow those to come out. No butterflies were harmed in the creation of these items, which is always good news. There we go. So that's what you get in the pack. A really, really gorgeous collection of beads. So happy days. I'm glad that you're all still there. Huge welcomes to all of you. Elaine's being very kind about my outfit. Thank you. It's quite a warm dress for a hot day, but I do love the dragons. Absolutely fabulous to see you all. It's 83 in Florida. Thank you for the weather report. I always appreciate my weather reports from where you are around the world. I'm slightly jealous, but today I'm less jealous because we've actually had really gorgeous weather. So you get spacers, you get saucers and pumpkins, you've got hot metallics and muted metallics, you've got these super cool faux pearl beads. They're enormous fun. A real hero for this strand is the metallic butterfly charm. Really solidly made. What you'll find in inexpensive bead mixes is that the little loop you get going across the top is super weak. Often they're pressed rather than forged, and this has got a beautiful detail on the back, so whichever side you're looking at it, it's going to be fabulous. You've got detailing on one side, which looks a little bit like a Grecian shield, and then never, never give up on the other side. So you've got beautiful options to work with. I like all of these. I mean, yellow is not high on my list of favourite colours, but this is such a happy little bead blend. So I'm going to scooch that up to the side for now, and we're going to take a closer look at our project together today. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, I've added 3 pieces just into the base most loop. You don't have to add any. If you just want a floral drop with a nice bar, you can have a shorter bar, longer bar, you can go for black and red, you can make a bumblebee. I don't know my way around butterflies. My husband is an amateur lepidopterist, so he would probably be able to identify this. I've got no idea, so I'm going to call it a yellow and black flapper. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. I've added both of the wings, but I'm going to show you something cool with the wings a bit later on as well. So I'm going to just pop that over to one side so you'll be able to keep an eye on what we're making together. These are all the beads I had left over from the first design here. It's not bead hungry. I'm focusing on those immense hero pieces from that blend. If you have any questions, I will pick them up at some point. I love the butterfly wings too. You need to come to Tucson. It's going to be 100 degrees today. Oh, that might be a tad, tiny, teeny bit warm for me. I do like it hot, but perhaps not that hot unless there's a pool, some shade, and a bar involved, you know, for some icy, icy fruit juice. Or potentially gin. So I'm going to work with some of these beads, and I'm just going to scooch those up to the other side and introduce you to today's wire. Now, the beauty of this piece is it is super, super simple. I'm basically using 2 or 3 tools. My bent chain nose pliers are used for absolutely everything. I could cook with them, maybe. I could do my hair with them. Not really. I am joking at this stage, but I do use them for almost all my jewellery projects. I've got some round nose pliers. You could use bail makers if you prefer. And I've also got some good quality flush cutters. So those are really all you need. I'm also only going to be working with the one piece of wire. I'm looking at 15 inches of 18 gauge. I'm working in raw copper because it shows up nicely on the board. I've tried to work with silver on the blue beading mat and it just doesn't show up as well as my multi-tonal backboard. And the reason I work with multi-tonal backboard is because it's easier for the human eye to differentiate movement with a subtle pattern than it is for a plain white or a plain blue background. So I've got my 15 or so inches of that wire. I'm working in round raw copper and I love working in round raw copper. Without getting too specific, 30 minutes west of Boston. Okay then. Yes, that sounds like a delightful part of the world. I am going to warm my wire through, especially on the first half. This is where the action is going to happen. So I'm using about half of that 15 or so inches of wire and I'm getting that really smooth and fluid, and there's not a great technique to it. Thumb and forefinger pressing over the wire and drawing that from the centre to the end. If you try to do it the other way, you'll end up bonking the wire into goodness knows where, and also it might hurt your fingers. So from the middle to the end, that's nice and hot and fluid, and if you pop that on the back of your hand, even in the balmy temperatures that you guys have right now, you'll still feel that that's actually quite warm. So we're going to start in the centre of our floral spiral, and this is such a cool, neat, entry-level design. It really is available to absolute beginners to wire. The first thing we're going to do is to start out by creating a spiral. So I tend to go quite close to the end of the wire, quite close to the tip of those pliers, and start rotating. Now I have specific issues with my wrists. I've got arthritis in a couple of my fingers and in the opposite wrist as well. So what I would say is when you're working with wire, warming that wire first makes it easier to manage, therefore you can jewellery make for longer, which is always a win. So I started off with a circular form like so. I'm just going to pop those round nose pliers out of the way for a second. I'm going to make sure that that's nice and flat, and I'm just opening and closing those pliers very gently to get that nice and flat, and making sure that I've got a good circular form in the middle. I'm going to chase around for a second time, and here I'm pushing the wire into my non-dominant forefinger and controlling very, very small movements. It's about 1/4 to 1/8 of a turn each time. Once I get to one circuit, 2 circuits of wire, I can bring that wire out at quite a jaunty angle. Now the best way to do that for me, because I'm right dominant, is to flip the design over, take my my bent chain nose pliers underneath, and I'm gripping the wire, the long tail of wire, just where it comes away from that double coil, and I'm just going to push that over so that the wire is coming away in a straight line, as if it started in the centre and radiated out. So we've got a nice double coil down at the bottom, and we've got a section of wire coming away which is really quite long still. I'm just going to hop onto the comments and see if there are any questions at this stage. We just have lots and lots of lovely people who are sending their greetings, which I adore. So thank you very much for letting me know that you are there, and huge apologies for Facebook deciding that it didn't want me to join in today. So what we're going to do is to create a series of petals. In my design, I've created 7 petals on my flower. Now the reason for that is it enables me, having an odd number, to have a loop that sits centrally down at the base of the design. You could make your petals much wider and have 5 of them, but you definitely benefit from having an odd number. Now before we go any further, I'm going to add some strength to that coil and the wire, just the first tiny bit as it comes away from the coil. Now the reason for this is we're not wiring that coil to the upright, which is something that I would do in a lot of designs. I would ensure that there was a closed circuit. For this one, because it's entry level, we're working with a single piece of wire. We're keeping it simple today. I'm going to open and close the flat surfaces of my pliers over the coil and over the first 1/4 inch of wire as it comes away from that coil. Doesn't really matter if you mark it slightly. If you prefer, you can use a slightly gentler touch. You could hammer, but only to around about there, or you could use your nylon jaw pliers and open and close lots, and then you won't have the marks on it. I'm not going to overly worry. Now if you have bail makers, they're really handy for this design, but I'm going to use round nose pliers because many of us have these in our stock anyway. So I'm going to warm just past where I added that little bit of hardening. So I'm holding the coil and drawing my thumb and forefinger over the first piece of wire that comes away. I'm going to pop my pliers in and I'm going to start rotating around the pliers. Now it doesn't matter if you move in this direction or in this direction. We're going to come back to the beginning anyway. So what I think I might do is copy what I did on the first one, and that's move away from where that bend occurs. So we've got the bend coming up this side, the coil has come around and it goes up, and then I'm bringing the wire back on itself to meet that section. So if I just show you that on the back of my hand as well. It's a bit like a giant paperclip at this stage, but it will look a little bit prettier when we get going. So I'm going to bring in my bent chain nose pliers at this stage. The reason I'm using bent chain nose pliers is because I can access underneath the design and it's easier for me to show you what you need to do next. If you don't have them, you can at this stage use your round nose pliers, but I would need to bring all the way up to here to use my round nose pliers because they are straight, which means everything's super blurry. So I'm going to drop those back down. You can use your round nose pliers for this bit. I'm supporting the long tail of wire. It's coming across the centre of that coil, and I'm going to push that very firmly back out to create my second petal. Now this can get a little bit repetitive, but all we're doing is we're creating as close as possible to be the same size petal as we move around the design. So pinching very firmly on that centre part. If you find that it comes apart in your hands, you can give that central section another good nom nom or munch with the flat faces of your pliers, and I'm just going to push the wire so that it sits adjacent to that first petal. I'm then going to just draw the wire around and about, put a little bit of heat in before popping back in with those round nose pliers to create my second petal. Now it's very easy as you do this for your petals to become much larger. If you take a hot second longer than I'm taking right now, you will be able to control that. You could measure it if you wanted to, but for the sake of expediency, I'm going to be quite casual with the measuring because I want to show you the full tutorial today. I don't want to skip any bits. I want to show you everything, but equally I don't want to spend 54 hours of your time just going, oh, in a bit, out a bit, in a bit, out a bit, like so. So I'm putting a little bit of warmth into the next bit. We're going to create our next petal. And I think probably we could go for 7 or 9 petals on this design. Small movements will help you gain control of your wire work. If you're working with a box joint plier, as I am today, don't allow your wire to sit down inside that box joint, otherwise you'll end up with sharp edges and weak wire. Always use the round section, pull the wire back across the centre. Now I'm always bringing that wire across the very, very beginning, the central section where we started. And that's so I know that I'm going to get my angle correct when I bring that next petal out. If you can hear the wire scraping on the desk, sorry about that. At least you can hear me now. We had 2 attempts where there was no sound at all, which is a bit of a drama, isn't it? Good old Facey. So I'm going to rub my thumb across the wire to soften that up and heat it ready to go. Rotate those round nose pliers around. Now I'm going to make this next petal far too small on purpose. So let's, oh dear. That's very obviously too little, isn't it? It's very obviously too short. So because we warmed that wire first, if you need to, rotate those pliers around just a little bit, and then you can bring that petal out to the correct size. I've made it far too large now. Oh dear. So what you can do, again, is just rotate the pliers around, draw the wire across that central section, give it a bit of a waggle, and in the end you'll get the right size. Now because we're using 15 inches of, in this instance I'm using raw copper wire, shows up nicely on the camera, look at that gleam, it's beautiful. If you're working with just wire, you can pop it in a tumbler and get a really nice high shine back on it at any time. If you want to prevent it from oxidizing, if I show you this piece which I made a couple of days ago, you can see it's a little bit darker, a little bit less shiny, and that's because the oils in our fingers Contact with skin, contact with atmosphere will oxidize raw copper. I love that. I really genuinely love the transience of a design when I'm creating in copper, knowing that pretty soon it's going to change and it's going to look different. If you don't like that, you can get various waxes. I'm not going to brand name any. Just find yourself a sealing wax and you can rub that over your hot pink copper and it will stay hot pink. What you can of course do is use a coated wire and then it will always stay the same colour. So I've got my next petal. I think that one's a bit small, but do you know what? I am not going to fret about that one little bit. I'm going to continue making the petals. Again, warming the wire through. You, if you wanted to, could spend a little bit more time to make sure that they are indeed all the same size. Having bail makers is quite handy because it means you can get the exact same position every single time, which means that this size is going to always be the same. The other thing you can do is pop a line using a permanent marker onto your pliers. I'm showing you an example on my chain nose pliers in red. Hopefully you can see that on camera. And that will give you an opportunity to keep the same measure all the time. I haven't done that on my round nose pliers today. So every time we're moving around, we're generating an extra petal, and we're trying to bring the pliers as close to that central coil as possible. I'm going to push the wire back out. Whilst I'm having a bit of a look at this, I'm going to drop down to the comments for a second and see if there are any questions right now. Anne says, cool, you're back on with full sound. Hello, says Robin Rose, everyone from hot Southern California. Fantastic. If there are any questions, I'll pick them up tomorrow or later on. If you want to open the design out a bit, you can have gaps between the petals because we're going to make sure that that's nice and firm before we move on anyway. A little bit more heat in that design, and we're going to keep going until we've got petals all the way around that central section. So a lot of times I see people who are new to wire work trying to speed run through a design. There are no shortcuts. If you want it to be neat and super quality, take your time. With practice, you'll be able to do things a lot more quickly, and that's fine. But when you're new to wire work, just take your time. Slow down, take a breath. You're allowed to be relaxed into this. Nobody wants you to be not enjoying yourself. So I'm going to grab my round nose pliers, rotate them around bit by bit, draw the wire across that centre section. So how many have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, we've already got 7. So I think today I'm going to go for 9. My petals are slightly smaller than they are, or they're slightly narrower. I think for this one I did use bail makers, but I wanted to make sure that everybody has access to this complete beginner's design. Draw the wire back sharply away from that central section, and we're going to go for 2 more petals before we move on to the upright and your bead order. So draw the wire back across the centre. Bring your either round nose pliers or bent chain nose pliers. You can use chain nose pliers if you're not trying to keep it a specific distance off the desk. That will be fine. You can hold it up to your face if you need to. So let's bring those round nose pliers back in for our final petal. Odd numbers, as I mentioned earlier, do work better in a design like this because it allows you to have a central petal down at the base. So for the last time, we're going to draw the wire back and away from that central spiral coil. What you can do, if you like, and I'll show you over the top first, is draw the base of the petal together. Then I'll show you from underneath. What we don't want to do is have any wire crossing over. So you can just draw all these pieces just slightly closer together if you need to. So that one's quite wide. Let's just draw that closer. Now, if you have a block and hammer, you can. I'm just going to show you how. I'm not going to do it because it will be very noisy. On my YouTube videos I dull the sound, but I can't do that for you today. So very, very gently you could tap all the way around, making sure you're not tapping on any crossing over sections. This needs to be flat, as if it's between 2 panes of glass. So you could give that a little bit of a hammer if you need to. If you have access, very inexpensive to get a small hobby hammer. They're not terribly expensive at all. I'm just going to pinch the design very firmly and then draw away in the opposite direction. You can see we've still got 5 or 6 inches of wire to work with. Just make sure that you're happy with how all of those petals sit. If you don't have access to a hammer and block, what you can do is open and close any flat facing pliers over the surface. Now again, I would hesitate to I would reiterate that you need to keep the design flat. Nothing is crossing over the top of anything else. It's all wire adjacent, as if it's between two panes of glass. We've got a little bit of space up that central pair of petals. Let's just pop it down on the board for a second. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in the middle. So I just need to centralise that up ever so slightly. And because we're working with 18 gauge, it is still relatively malleable. Just going to check in to see if there are any questions before I add my beads in. It's freezing and repeating for Anne. How is it going for everyone else? Hopefully it will sort itself out for you, Anne. Now, in my original design, I added on some feisty lemon-toned crystal rondelles, and then there were also some beautiful AB coated, I don't know what kind of colour lemon you would call that. It really is a slightly amber lemon colourway. Absolutely gorgeous. I think what I'm going to do is just add some fairly different beads to see how different it could look. I'm going to start with one of the larger zesty lemon rondelles. That fits between the petals. If you find that that didn't fit, simply take it off and try one of the smaller zesty lemon crystal rondelles. So that fits really neatly in between. So I might intersperse that with the cubes. The cubes are really cool. That's going to look different. It's going to look really different to the other one. I'm not sure if I like it. I might change my mind. Let's add one of those gorgeous crystal ovals instead. Let's see what that looks like. Oh, I like that. That's really pretty. So I think what I'm going to do is go with the slightly smaller faceted rondelles in the very, very vibrant lemon crystal. And then I might go for another one of those oval coated faceted beads. These are beautiful. They're quite chonksome. And then we'll finish off with one of the lemon, the sort of midi size one. There are some tiny ones as well in the bead mix. Let's just pop that down for a hot second. So you've got loads of choices with which beads you could use for this. There's black ones you could go for, there's metallics, there are bead caps, there are massive saucers, pumpkin spacers. You've got, I think, 2 sizes of the rondelle spacers with rhinestones. Let's pop those out of the way. I've made my bead choices. So up at the top, what we're going to do, I'm just going to lay this one out of the way, but where you can still see it. Checking on the video comments now to see if anybody else is freezing. It's fine for everyone else, and I'm sorry, you may need to just check back in a minute. It may be that Facebook has decided that you're the next person on the hit list. I'm going to make a wrapped loop up at the top. Now what you'll see, because I haven't spent too long strengthening the wire, is that that's a little bit openable. If, before you add your beads on the upright, you spend some time really opening and closing your pliers, or better still, you hammer that, you'll find that that sits a lot stronger. What we've got is an entry-level, beginners accessible tutorial today. So I think it's really pretty either way you want to do it. So I will show you very quickly how to do that wrapped loop up at the top. So I'm going to pop my flat facing, they're bent chain nose pliers, over the top and draw the last tail of that wire up and away from the board and away from the design. Turning that sideways, I'm going to then grab my round nose pliers again and rotate that wire around. You can do that in as many turns as it takes you. I tend to get a shepherd's crook shape first to see if I'm happy with the form, and then draw the tail all the way around to create that circular form. Take your time with loops and they will become nice and neat and tidy. What we're going to do is fill the space between where the wire crosses and that top crystal. Because we're working with a glass crystal, what we don't want to do is put too much pressure on it, so be careful. Just think about leaving the tiniest gap between your top crystal. Now I've made a bit of a gap in that wire, so before I go any further I'm just going to tighten that up. Just putting those pliers one side and the other side of that coil. I'll do that on the other side as well, and you can see that that looks so much neater when you take a second just to tighten the coils. And I'm going to draw the tail of wire over the front. Now I haven't brought that coil of wire all the way down to the upmost crystal. I've left a gap, and that's because I don't want to put any pressure on the glass. Now you can either take this tail of wire round to the back, as I did in the example, makes for a very nice, clean and tidy design, or you can add yourself one of those coils that you'll see everywhere on my designs. I'm going to show you a very tiny little coil that's worth about 1 inch of wire. So I've just trimmed a little away, and we're going to add another coil exactly the same as where we started down at the base. Sometimes it adds balance, sometimes it hides a slightly messy coil, especially when you're wrapping loops. So I've started that coil going. I'm just going to tighten that up very, very carefully and gently, and then bring that tiny, tiny portions of a turn at a time, protecting that glass crystal bead until it sits centrally. So I can take that just a tiny smidge further, and then what I'm going to do is grab the whole coil and flip it upwards so it sits in front of the wrapped loop. So that by itself is a complete project. What we can do is bring in those gossamer style wings. Now if you want to, you can use them exactly as they are, but what I'm going to do is open up one of these jump rings. Let me do it professionally instead of doing it by hand, which is like very, very naughty. You often do that by hand. So I'm just going to open up the jump ring like so, twisting one side forwards, and I'm going to add a component into that wing. So as I said earlier, these are quite chonksome, the loops at the top of the butterflies. So you may need to open that jump ring just a little bit further. I didn't open it enough. And I'm just going to show you how to add the one section into the base of your design. So because we've gone for an odd number, we have a central petal down at the bottom. And I'm just going to loop that through and then close the jump ring up. And when I've closed that jump ring, I heard, you may not have picked it up on camera, but I heard a tiny little snicked noise, and that means that the two ends are touching, which is what we want. We want jump rings to touch. So I'm just going to leave this piece like so. On the other one, what I did is I removed one of the gossamer wings from its jump ring and put both of the gossamer wings behind the butterfly charm, and then used the leftover jump ring to attach the never, never give up. So you've got options with how you can work that. Let's have a look and see if there are any questions whilst you have a quick gander at the example and the piece we've made together. You could get 2 packages and make those into a pair of earrings. You absolutely can. Simple elegance of the design, says Sharon. So many beautiful choices. Love it, says Paula. Thank you so much. Really appreciate all of your kind comments. If the video has frozen for you, just maybe log out and refresh, and you'll probably be able to pick up where you left off pretty soon. Most people seem to be able to watch the video now, so hopefully that's okay for you. Well, sorry about the slightly dodgy start to our live together there today, but I hope that you've enjoyed the tutorial. Now, today we worked in 18 gauge round raw copper wire. You can use whatever colour you like, of course. It's going to look beautiful with silver, it's going to look beautiful with gold, it's going to look beautiful with rose gold. Heck, if you've got purple wire and you want to use purple wire, go for your life. That's the beauty of making jewellery with wire. You get the opportunity to completely customise and make bespoke jewellery, both for yourself, to sell, and for friends and loved ones. Anyway, I am going to love you and leave you. I will check back in on the comments tomorrow. If there are any questions, I'll try and catch up with them. Again, I can only apologise for Facebook's unwillingness to share my dulcet tones with you today. Hopefully you're going to enjoy the rest of your day, and I will catch up with you. I'll be back next week, if they let me. Take care. Bye for now.